A millionaire focused on work begins to realize he has neglected his daughter's feelings. She, despite everything, feels invisible and alone amidst luxury. Everything changes when he finds her alone, with tired hands trying to fix something that wasn't her fault. If this beautiful story of love and overcoming touched you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you're watching. The sun rose over the horizon of Chasia's New York City, casting its first golden rays over the mirrored towers of the Upper East Side. On the penthouse of one of the most luxurious buildings in the area, Richard Alcott prepared for another day of work. At 45 years old, he owned a financial empire that grew each year, a result of a sharp business acumen and a determination that often crossed the line into obsession. Observing the city awaken from the height of his privileges, Richard adjusted his pure silk Italian tie, while the platinum watch on his wrist marked 6:30 in the morning. From the other side of the solid mahogany door separating his suite from the corridor, the sound of the mansion awakening could already be heard. Footsteps of employees, the discreet clinking of cutlery being arranged for breakfast, the rustling of curtains being opened to let in the morning light. On that same floor, a few meters away, a small figure rose in a room as large as it was well decorated, but devoid of the warmth that a child's space would normally harbor. Antonia, just 10 years old, rubbed her sleepy eyes as she placed her feet on the soft carpet. Her gaze wandered around the room, momentarily stopping at the shelves filled with expensive and untouched toys. The room's ceiling, painted like a starry sky by a renowned artist, could not disguise the solitude that permeated that space. Antonia walked to the window and touched the glass with her fingertips, observing the city that seemed tiny below. In her childish head, precociously matured by the absence of affection, a recurring thought: would she manage today, somehow, to catch her father's attention? The bedroom door opened without warning, and the elegant and imposing figure of Rebecca Alcott appeared in the doorway. At 36, Antonia's stepmother was the perfect image of refinement and sophistication. A former international model, she now dedicated her time to managing charitable foundations, more for social status than for true philanthropy, and to maintaining her impeccable image as the wife of one of Art's New York City's most powerful men. Antonia, you should already be getting ready for school. You know your father hates delays, Rebecca said without truly looking at her stepdaughter. Her eyes were already scanning the room, searching for any imperfection that could be pointed out. Good morning, Rebecca, Antonia replied, her voice low, almost a whisper. Is Dad having breakfast with us today? Rebecca adjusted the sleeve of her silk blouse before answering. Your father has a video conference with investors from Dubai in half an hour. Perhaps you'll see him on the weekend, if he doesn't need to go to Washington, D.C. for that meeting at the ministry. The disappointment on Antonia's face was visible, but Rebecca had already turned to leave. Siestate Maria has prepared your uniform. Be ready in 20 minutes. The door closed, leaving Antonia alone again with her thoughts. The girl walked to the dressing table and sat down, looking at her reflection in the mirror. Her brown hair framed a face that tried unsuccessfully to hide the sadness behind large almond-shaped eyes, a legacy from the mother she could barely remember. In the office annexed to the master suite, Richard reviewed documents while drinking his black coffee. The virtual assistant was already sending reminders about the day's commitments, and his personal assistant, Michael, organized the folders that would be needed for the meetings. The developer contracts in Miami are here, Dr. Alcott, and the report on the marina project in the Hamptons too, Michael informed, placing the folders on the glass table. Richard merely nodded, without taking his eyes off the laptop screen, and the closing of the negotiation with the Chinese, scheduled for 4. I managed to move it up by an hour as you requested. Excellent. I need to be free by 6 for the video conference with New York. Michael hesitated for a moment before speaking again. Sir, just to remind you, today is your daughter's presentation at school. The coordinator called yesterday confirming the parents' presence at 5 o'clock. An almost imperceptible sigh escaped Richard's lips, and he finally looked up. It won't be possible. Ask Rebecca to represent the family. Buy flowers and have them delivered to Antonia after the presentation. Yes, sir, Michael replied, accustomed to this type of solution. Downstairs, Antonia was already having her solitary breakfast at the immense dining room table. Maria, the housekeeper who had worked for the family since before the girl's birth, placed an extra slice of orange cake on the little girl's plate. "Eat properly, child. Today is your big day, isn't it? The choir presentation?" Maria asked with an affectionate smile. Antonia's eyes lit up for an instant. "Yes, Maria, I'm going to sing a part by myself." "How wonderful. I'm sure your father will be proud." The girl lowered her gaze to her plate, playing with a piece of fruit. "Do you think he will?" Maria felt a pang in her chest. She had worked in that house long enough to know the chances were minimal. "Of course he will, my dear. He's very busy, but he always thinks of you." The sound of quick footsteps interrupted the conversation. Richard crossed the dining room on his way to the door, phone to his ear, discussing numbers Antonia didn't understand. "Dad!" the girl called, quickly getting up from her chair. Richard gestured with his hand, asking for a moment while continuing his phone conversation. Antonia waited, standing with an expectant smile on her face. After a few moments, he covered the phone's microphone. "Good morning, Antonia. Behave at school." "I'll be busy today. Rebecca will go to your presentation," he said quickly, before returning to his call and walking to the exit, where the driver was already waiting. The girl's smile slowly faded. Maria approached and caressed her hair. "Finish your breakfast, dear. The driver will take you to school now." During the ride in the luxurious armored SUV, Antonia looked out the window at the frantic movement of New York City. Children with backpacks walked hand in hand with their parents towards schools less prestigious than hers. A knot formed in her throat as she watched a father hug his daughter before they said goodbye at a school gate. "We've arrived." "Miss Antonia," announced the driver. "Mr. Jenkins," parking in front of the imposing building of the Upper East Side Academy, an institution attended by the city's high society. In the schoolyard, children chatted animatedly while waiting for the bell. Antonia walked timidly to a small group where Bianca, her only true friend, was. "Hi, Tony. Ready for the presentation?" Bianca asked with her usual enthusiasm. "I think so," Antonia replied, trying to smile. "My parents have already confirmed their presence. They're super excited. How about yours?" "My dad is very busy, but maybe he can come," Antonia lied. Knowing it wouldn't happen, Bianca, knowing her friend's situation, changed the subject. "Come on, let's rehearse one more time before class starts." The two girls moved away to a corner of the yard, where they began to review the song. Antonia's voice, surprisingly mature and melodious for her age, caught the attention of passers-by. It was one of the few moments she felt truly alive. In his office on Wall Street, Richard conducted a meeting with foreign investors. The numbers projected on the screen impressed everyone. His holding company had grown 17% in the last quarter, a remarkable achievement in times of economic instability. "What I can tell you, gentlemen," Richard concluded, "is that there are no obstacles when you have determination and strategy. Our company continues to expand because we do not allow ourselves distractions or sentimentalism in business decisions." The executives applauded, impressed not only with the results, but with the calculating coldness with which Richard conducted his business. It was this same coldness that made him admired in the corporate world and absent in the family universe. During lunch at an exclusive restaurant, Richard received a call from Rebecca. "Richard, an unforeseen event came up. The foundation meeting was rescheduled for this afternoon and I can't miss it. It's about the funding for the next charity event." "And what does that have to do with me, Rebecca?" he asked, already irritated by the interruption. "Antonia's presentation." "I can't go." Richard ran a hand over his face, visibly annoyed. "Can't you reschedule your meeting?" "Impossible. The mayor will be present, and you know how important that is for our political contacts," she replied, using the argument she knew would convince her husband. "I'll see what I can do," Richard said, ending the call. Immediately he dialed his assistant. "Michael, try to reschedule the video conference with New York. Say a family emergency came up." On the other end of the line, the assistant hesitated. "So we've tried to reschedule this meeting 3 times. They made it clear this is the last opportunity before they reconsider the partnership." Richard was silent for a few seconds, weighing his options. "I understand. In that case, send more elaborate flowers to Antonia and schedule a special dinner for the weekend. We can take her to that Japanese restaurant she likes." "Yes, sir." Any specific message for the card accompanying the flowers? Something like, "Dad regrets not being able to be there, but is always thinking of you." You know what to write, Michael. At school, the hours passed slowly for Antonia. Each time the classroom door opened, she looked up, hoping for a miracle she knew wouldn't happen. During the final rehearsal, the music teacher, Helen, noticed her distraction. "Antonia, you need to concentrate. Your part is fundamental to the harmony of the piece," the teacher warned. "Sorry, Miss Helen, I'll try harder." The teacher, knowing the student's family situation, softened her tone. "Your voice is a gift, Antonia. When you sing, it's as if everything around you transforms. Don't let anything overshadow that, okay?" The girl nodded, grateful for the rare moment of genuine attention. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the school auditorium began to fill with anxious parents, cameras in hand, ready to record every moment of their children's presentation. Backstage, Antonia peeked through the curtain, searching in vain for a familiar face in the audience. "He's not coming, is he?" Bianca asked, placing a hand on her friend's shoulder. Antonia swallowed the lump forming in her throat. "It's okay. He has many responsibilities. My parents can record your part too. I'll send you the video later." "Thanks, bye." The presentation began promptly at 5 o'clock. The children's choir enchanted the audience with angelic voices in a selection of Brazilian folk songs. When it was time for Antonia's solo, she stepped a few paces ahead of her classmates, took a deep breath and began to sing. Her voice, laden with an emotion beyond her age, silenced the auditorium. The melody of Aicio de Terra, sung by her Milton Nascimento, gained a unique interpretation in her childish yet deeply felt voice. As she sang about planting, watering, and cultivating, Antonia thought of her father, of the relationship that never blossomed, of the affection that was never watered. In the office, Richard signed the last documents before the important video conference when his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Maria, the housekeeper. "The presentation has started. Antonia looks like an angel singing. It's a shame you can't see it." Along with the message, Maria had sent a photo of the girl on stage, illuminated by the spotlights, with an expression so pure and yet so melancholic that, for a moment, Richard felt something stir within him. Quickly, however, he pushed the feeling away. The American executives were already connected to the video conference, waiting for him. After the presentation, while the other students received hugs and congratulations from their families, Antonia remained in the corner of the stage, holding her participation certificate with trembling hands. That's when a delivery arrived. A huge bouquet of flowers with a card. "Dad is proud. Sorry I can't be there, love you. Signed, Dad." The handwriting Antonia knew was not her father's. She had received enough cards with the same handwriting, Michael's, to recognize the difference. "What beautiful flowers," exclaimed Miss Helen, approaching. "Did your father send them?" "Yes," Antonia replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He always sends flowers." Back in the penthouse, it was already night when Antonia finished organizing her sheet music at her bedroom desk. The presentation certificate had been carefully placed on the dresser, next to similar ones, all accompanied by apology cards for absences. A light knock on the door announced Maria's entry, carrying a tray with hot chocolate and cookies. "I thought you might want something sweet before bed. You were wonderful today. Did you watch, Maria?" "Of course I did. I asked Mrs. Rebecca for permission to leave early. I stayed at the back of the auditorium. I almost cried when you sang." Antonia smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you for coming." Maria placed the tray on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed. "You know, my child, sometimes people don't know how to show love the way we need it. That doesn't mean they don't love you. I know Dad loves me, Maria. He just forgets to show it." The housekeeper caressed the girl's hair. "One day he'll realize what he's missing. Until then, know that there are people who care very much about you." After Maria left, Antonia looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere down below, perhaps her father was in another meeting, talking about numbers, investments, strategies, all those things that seemed much more important than a 10-year-old girl with a solo in the school choir. Before sleeping, she did what she did every night. She took the framed photo hidden in her bedside table drawer. It was the only photo she had with her mother, taken shortly before her passing when Antonia was only 3 years old. In the image, they both smiled in a park, with her father in the background, also smiling. Something rare these days. Richard Alcott's office was on the 30th floor of a commercial building on Chaltix Wednesday, the financial heart of New York City. From that height, the city looked like a meticulously organized chessboard, with its avenues forming precise lines between the buildings that stretched to the horizon. It was the kind of view that fueled his sense of power and control. On that Friday morning, while reviewing quarterly reports, Richard was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Michael, his assistant, with a slightly worried expression. "Dr. Alcott, Antonia's school director, is on the line. She insists on speaking with you personally." Richard frowned. Unscheduled interruptions were not part of his carefully planned routine. "Can't you handle it?" "The audit team is arriving in 15 minutes. She's already spoken with Mrs. Rebecca, but she said the matter requires your direct attention. It's about Antonia's behavior." A sigh escaped Richard's lips. He placed his Mont Blanc pen on the glass table and gestured for Michael to transfer the call. "Richard Alcott," he answered, in a professional tone. "Mr. Alcott, this is Marianne Caldwell, director of the C1 Upper East Side Academy. Thank you for taking a few minutes of your time. How can I help you, Director? Has something happened to Antonia?" "Mr. Alcott, Antonia is a brilliant student with extraordinary potential, but I've noticed concerning changes in her behavior in recent weeks. She has been increasingly isolating herself from her classmates, showing difficulty concentrating in class, and this morning she had a crying episode during art class that we couldn't understand." Richard felt an uncomfortable pang in his chest, something between irritation and guilt. "Antonia has always been a sensitive child, Director. Perhaps she's just going through a phase." "I understand, Mr. Alcott, but as educators we believe that behaviors like this generally reflect situations the child is experiencing. We would like to suggest an in-person meeting with you to discuss ways to support Antonia at this time. Unfortunately, my schedule is extremely tight in the coming weeks. Can I ask my wife to attend? She closely monitors Antonia's routine." The silence on the other end of the line was almost palpable before the director responded. "Mr. Alcott, with all due respect, we have already spoken with Mrs. Rebecca. We believe your presence, as her father, would be fundamental at this time. Antonia drew something very significant in art class that I think you should see personally." Richard quickly checked his digital agenda. "Monday, 7:30 a.m. I can spare 30 minutes before my first meeting of the day. I will be waiting. Mr. Alcott, thank you for your time." After hanging up, Richard remained motionless for a few moments, looking at the family portrait on his desk, a professional photo, taken last Christmas, where everyone smiled with studied perfection. Rebecca, elegant in her red dress, he austere in his Italian suit, and Antonia, small and almost imperceptible between the two, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The thought was interrupted by the auditor's entry. Quickly, Richard tucked his concerns into the same mental compartment, where he stored all personal issues that threatened to interfere with his professional routine. That same morning, at the Upper East Side Academy, Antonia sat alone on a bench in the corner of the yard during recess. She watched the other children playing, laughing, sharing secrets, a world from which she felt increasingly distant. "Can I sit here?" Bianca's voice interrupted her thoughts. Antonia nodded, moving slightly to make space for her friend. "You disappeared after art class." "Miss Paula Jeans was worried," Bianca commented, opening her snack. "It was nothing," Antonia murmured, shrugging. "I just didn't like my drawing." Bianca offered half of her sandwich to her friend, who refused with a gesture. "I thought your drawing was amazing. A bit sad maybe, but very beautiful." "Who was that person with their back turned?" Antonia hesitated before answering. "My dad. He's always got his back turned." "Oh," Bianca seemed momentarily speechless. "You know, my parents are organizing a camping trip at their country place this weekend. Do you want to come? There'll be a bonfire, scary stories, and my dad will make that barbecue you like." A momentary gleam lit up Antonia's eyes, but it soon faded. "I don't know if they'll let me. Rebecca will probably say I have extra lessons or something. What if my parents talk directly to your dad? They could call him." Antonia shook her head. "He never answers. And even if he did, He always agrees with whatever Rebecca decides. The bell rang, announcing the end of recess. The two girls stood up, Bianca with her usual energy, Antonia with dragging steps, as if carrying an invisible weight on her small shoulders. In the teacher's lounge, Director Marianne talked with Paula, the art teacher, as they both observed the drawing Antonia had made that morning. "It's impressive how she can express so much with so few strokes," Paula commented, pointing to the solitary figure in the center of the paper, a small girl in a space too large, with a masculine silhouette with its back turned in the distance. "This isn't just artistic talent, Paula. It's a cry for help," Marianne replied with evident concern. "I finally managed to get her father to come for a meeting on Monday. Finally. I've been trying to flag Antonia's problems for months, but her stepmother always downplays the situation. Rebecca Alcott is a very intelligent woman, but she clearly has no idea how to deal with a sensitive child like Antonia. And the father. Well, let's see if I can make him see what's happening." At the end of the school day, when the driver came to pick up Antonia, the girl silently got into the car, settling into the back seat of the SUV. The driver, Mr. Jenkins, had worked for the family since before her birth and was one of the few people who truly noticed her mood changes. "Everything all right there, little one?" he asked, looking in the rearview mirror. Antonia nodded automatically, but her eyes were fixed on her backpack, where she had carefully stored the drawing that had caused so much commotion. She didn't want Rebecca to see it. Upon arriving home, Rebecca was waiting in the living room, tablet in hand, apparently managing the details of another charity event. "How was school?" she asked distractedly without looking up. "Normal," Antonia replied, already heading for the stairs. "Wait a moment," Rebecca called, finally looking at her stepdaughter. "We need to talk about the call I received from the director today." Antonia stopped, feeling a chill in her stomach. "About what?" "Apparently you had some kind of breakdown during art class. Do you want to explain what happened?" The girl gripped her backpack strap tightly. "It was nothing. I just didn't like my drawing." "Antonia," Rebecca's tone hardened slightly, "you know how stressed your father gets when he receives calls from school. He has enough worries without having to deal with this kind of situation. If there's a problem, we need to solve it now." "There's no problem," Antonia murmured, avoiding her stepmother's gaze. Rebecca sighed, clearly impatient. "Very well. The director has scheduled a meeting with your father for Monday. I hope by then you've resolved whatever is bothering you. Your father doesn't have time to waste on childish dramas." The words hit Antonia like stones, but she kept her face impassive, a skill she had developed over the years. "Can I go upstairs now?" "Go, dinner will be served at 7. And don't forget you have piano lessons tomorrow at 9. In the refuge of her room, Antonia finally allowed the tears to fall. Carefully, she took the drawing from her backpack and contemplated it. On the margins of the paper, she had written a sentence the teacher hadn't seen. "If I scream very loudly, will anyone hear me?" The sound of her cell phone interrupted the moment. It was a message from Bianca. "My parents talked to your stepmom about the camping trip. She said she'd check with your dad." "Fingers crossed!" Antonia felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was an opportunity to escape even briefly the loneliness that suffocated her in an immense house, empty of affection. That night, when Richard finally arrived home, it was past 10. The mansion was silent, with only a few strategic lights on. In his personal office, he found Rebecca reviewing some documents. "Long meeting?" she asked, getting up to greet him with a formal kiss. "The Chinese are too meticulous," he replied, loosening his tie. "We managed to reach an agreement, but it took longer than I expected." "Excellent," Rebecca smiled, pouring him a drink. "Oh, before I forget, Antonia's friend's mother called. They want to take her on some kind of camping trip this weekend. Obviously, I said I'd check with you, but I don't think it's a good idea. Antonia has piano lessons tomorrow, and on Sunday we have lunch with the Montgomerys." Richard took a sip of whiskey, feeling the liquid burn his throat. "Which friend is this?" "Bianca, that girl from the choir. Her parents have some country place upstate." Richard vaguely recalled seeing the girl at the choir presentation through the photos Maria had sent. "And Antonia wants to go?" Rebecca shrugged. "You know how children are. Of course she wants to go play instead of studying or attending family commitments." Something in Rebecca's tone bothered Richard, but he was too tired to analyze the feeling. Perhaps it would be good for her to see different places interact with other children. "Richard," Rebecca's voice took on a slightly reproving tone, "you know how Antonia is. She needs structure, routine. Besides, the Montgomerys are looking forward to seeing you. Their son just came back from Harvard and wants to tell her about the university. The Montgomery boy is 23. What is Antonia at 10 going to talk to him about Harvard? It's precisely this kind of exposure that will inspire her to have academic ambitions, Richard. We want her to follow in your footsteps, don't we? Harvard, MBA, maybe even a doctorate." Richard looked at the amber liquid in his glass, feeling a weariness that went beyond the physical. "She's 10, Rebecca. Maybe she just needs to be a child for now." Rebecca approached, adjusting his shirt collar with a calculated gesture. "So you didn't get where you are by leaving things to chance, dear. Her education is crucial now. If we start giving in on small things like this, she'll soon be questioning all our decisions." "All right," he conceded, finishing his drink. "You're right. Tell her friend's family that unfortunately Antonia has commitments this weekend." He paused before adding, "Oh, the school director called. She scheduled a meeting for Monday." Rebecca's expression hardened slightly. "Yes, she mentioned it to me earlier. Apparently Antonia had some kind of breakdown during art class. She's probably just seeking attention. You know how dramatic children that age can be. And did you talk to Antonia about it?" "Of course. She said it was nothing. She just didn't like the drawing she made. Frankly, I think the school is overreacting. If we react excessively to every little drama, we'll only encourage her to seek attention that way." Richard nodded, although a small part of him wondered if he should check personally what had happened. However, weariness and trust in Rebecca's judgment made him file away the concern. "Is she already asleep?" he asked. "Probably. Maria put her to bed at 9, as always. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed too. Tomorrow I have a video conference with Dubai at 6 in the morning." Upstairs, contrary to Rebecca's assumption, Antonia was wide awake. Sitting on the windowsill of her room, she watched the city lights with her cell phone in hand, anxiously waiting for a message from Bianca. When the device finally vibrated, the disappointment was immediate. "My mom just talked to yours. She said you can't come because you have too many family commitments." "Sorry, Tony." Antonia put her cell phone aside and hugged her knees to her chest. She wasn't surprised. She rarely received permission for activities that weren't on Rebecca's rigid schedule. Still, each refusal was a small wound added to so many others. She heard footsteps in the corridor, probably her father coming home. For a moment, she thought of leaving her room and trying to talk to him, to personally ask to go camping, perhaps if he saw how much it meant to her. But the footsteps passed directly by her bedroom door, as they always did. The familiar sound of the main bedroom door closing ended any hope. The next morning, during breakfast, Antonia remained silent while Maria served pancakes, her favorite Saturday dish. "Eat, child," the housekeeper encouraged. "You need energy for piano lessons." "I'm not hungry, Maria," Antonia replied, playing with her fork. "Antonia isn't feeling well?" Richard's voice surprised them both. It was rare to see him at the breakfast table on a Saturday morning. "Dad!" The girl's face lit up momentarily. "I thought you would have already left for your meeting." "The video conference ended earlier than expected," he explained, accepting the cup of coffee Maria offered him. "So, what's wrong with your appetite today?" Antonia hesitated, looking quickly at Maria, who gave her a small encouraging nod. "Dad, Bianca, my friend from the choir, invited me to go to her family's country place this weekend. There's a bonfire, stories, and her dad makes a really good barbecue." She paused, gathering courage. "I really wanted to go." Richard observed his daughter, the hopeful look, the small hands nervously clutching the napkin. For a moment he saw in her traces of Camilla, his first wife who had passed away 7 years ago. The same gentle determination, the same gaze that seemed to see through people. "Rebecca mentioned the invitation," he said finally. "But you have piano lessons today and lunch with the Montgomerys tomorrow." "I could practice piano twice next week to make up for it," Antonia suggested quickly. "And as for the Montgomerys, well, I don't think they'll even notice if I'm not there." "Of course they will, Antonia. They're practically family." "But they're your friends, Dad. They only talk about business, and their son only wants to talk about college." She paused, before adding in a low voice, Nobody really talks to me at those lunches." The words hit Richard in an unexpected way. For the first time, he wondered what these social events would be like from the perspective of a 10-year-old child, surrounded by adults discussing topics that probably made no sense to her. "And at Bianca's country place, what would you do?" he asked, surprising himself with his genuine interest. Antonia's eyes lit up. "Her dad set up a zip line between the trees, and there's a lake where we can swim. At night, they make a bonfire and tell stories. Bianca's older brother plays the guitar. Oh, and they have horses." Richard couldn't help but notice how much more animated his daughter seemed talking about this outing than he had seen her in months. It was then that he realized he couldn't remember the last time he had heard her speak with such enthusiasm about anything. "Well," he began hesitantly, "maybe we can—" "Good morning. Family." Rebecca's voice cut through the moment. Elegant even in casual clothes, she entered the dining room exuding her characteristic perfume. "What a pleasant surprise to see you home on a Saturday morning." "Dear, the video conference ended earlier than expected," Richard explained again. Rebecca noticed Antonia's animated expression and frowned slightly. "Did something happen that I should know about?" "Antonia was telling me about the invitation to her friend's country place." Rebecca's expression subtly hardened. "Richard, we already discussed this last night and agreed she wasn't going." "You agreed, Rebecca. I just didn't have the energy to argue." Richard poured himself more coffee, with a studied calm that he knew would further irritate his wife. "Besides, it's just a weekend in the country. What harm can there be in that?" It's not about the outing itself, Richard. It's about consistency in education. If we start going back on our decisions every time Antonia makes a sad puppy face, we'll soon lose all authority." "It's not about authority," Richard retorted, feeling growing irritation. "It's about letting my daughter have normal childhood experiences. When was the last time we saw her so excited about something?" Rebecca crossed her arms, a defensive posture Richard knew well. "I understand you're concerned about her because of the school's call. But giving in like this impulsively isn't the solution. Antonia needs to learn that the world doesn't bend to her whims." "Whims?" "She asked to spend a weekend with a friend, Rebecca. She didn't ask for an imported car or a trip to Paris." Richard placed the cup on the table with more force than he intended. "And as for the Montgomerys, we can simply say she got sick. It's not as if the company's future depends on the presence of a 10-year-old girl at a business lunch. It's precisely that attitude that worries me, Richard. You spend entire weeks practically ignoring her existence, and suddenly you decide you know what's best for Antonia, contradicting all the planning we've established." Rebecca's words hit him like a punch to the gut. There was truth in them, he knew. His presence in Antonia's life was, at best, inconsistent. Still, the veiled accusation that he had no right to comment on his own daughter's upbringing infuriated him. "We established?" Richard laughed humorlessly. "As I recall, Rebecca, you took control of Antonia's routine from the beginning, and I allowed it because I thought it would be better for her to have some stability after her mother's death. But I'm starting to wonder if I made a mistake." Rebecca's face paled slightly. "Are you implying that I don't take good care of her?" "I'm saying that perhaps we've overemphasized structure and forgotten that she's still a child." Richard stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. "She's going to the country place this weekend. As for the rest, we can discuss it later. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to make some calls." Upstairs, Antonia could barely contain her excitement as she tossed clothes into a backpack. With trembling fingers, she typed a message to Bianca. "My dad changed his mind. I can go, he's even taking me there himself." The reply came almost instantly, filled with celebratory emojis. "No way. That's awesome. My parents will be super happy. We're leaving home at 11 a.m. Will you make it?" Antonia looked at the wall clock. 8:15 a.m. "I think so. I'll hurry." Maria entered the room, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. "So you're really going to the country place? How wonderful, my dear." "Dad said yes, Maria. He's taking me himself." Antonia practically bounced as she put a toothbrush in her toiletry bag. "Do you think I should take the blue swimsuit or the pink one?" "Clemens to you then, take both." "You never know when you'll need a change," Maria advised, helping to fold the clothes Antonia had haphazardly thrown into her backpack. "And don't forget the sunscreen. We don't want you coming back looking like a little shrimp, do we?" Antonia laughed, a crystalline sound that echoed through the room. Maria couldn't help an emotional smile. It had been a long time since she had heard that genuine laugh. As they organized the backpack, they heard firm knocks on the door. It was Richard. "May I come in?" "Of course, Dad," Antonia exclaimed, running to open the door. Richard entered, noting the state of joyful disorder in the usually immaculate room. "I see you're already getting ready." "I'm almost ready. Bianca said they leave at 11 a.m. We'll make it, won't we?" "Perfectly." Richard checked his watch. "I'll take a shower and change, and then we can go. I'll need their address. I already texted her asking. As soon as she replies, I'll let you know." Richard nodded, observing his daughter's almost feverish excitement. He couldn't remember seeing her like this, so visibly happy in a long time. The realization brought with it a pang of guilt. How much of Antonia's life had he missed, absorbed by meetings and business strategies? "Do you want me to bring anything else? A warmer coat for the evening, perhaps?" he offered, in a rare moment of practical parental concern. Antonia seemed surprised by the question. "I think so. Maria said it might get cold at night." "Right, I'll be ready in 30 minutes. He hesitated at the door. "Antonia, I'm happy you're excited about this outing." The words, simple as they were, brought a special sparkle to the girl's eyes. "Thank you for letting me go, Dad." Upon returning to his room, Richard found Rebecca sitting on the edge of the bed with a tense expression. "You're actually doing this then? Taking her personally?" "Yes, I am." Richard began selecting clothes from the closet. "I promised her." "And what about your meeting with the investors this afternoon?" "I'll reschedule." Rebecca stood up, visibly perturbed. "You never reschedule meetings, Richard. Not even when you had a 102-degree fever last year." "Perhaps it's time to reevaluate my priorities," he replied, with a casualness that didn't reflect the storm of emotions inside him. "This has to do with the call from the school, doesn't it? You're feeling guilty, and now you want to make up for it by suddenly being Father of the Year." Richard stopped what he was doing and faced his wife. "It's not about guilt, Rebecca. It's about realizing that my daughter barely smiles anymore, that she spends weekends surrounded by adults talking about things that make no sense to her, that I barely know her tastes, her friends, her dreams." "You're being dramatic," Rebecca said dismissively. "Antonia has everything a child could wish for. Top-notch education, extracurricular lessons with the best teachers, clothes, toys, trips, everything but her father's presence," Richard completed, the realization hitting him full force. "And, apparently, a stepmother who understands that a child needs more than a perfect schedule." Rebecca's face hardened. "That's unfair, Richard. I've dedicated myself to raising her as if she were my own daughter." "Have you?" Richard's tone was more thoughtful than accusatory. "When was the last time you played with her, Rebecca? Or asked about her dreams? Or simply hugged her for no reason?" Rebecca opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. The question hung in the air, uncomfortable in its simplicity and the difficulty of answering it. "I'm going to get ready now," Richard said, ending the conversation. "I should be back Sunday night." A little over an hour later, Richard's car parked in front of a middle-class house in a Queens neighborhood. It was a simple but well-maintained two-story house, with a small front garden where toys and bicycles suggested the presence of children. A reality very different from the high-tech, impersonal mansion where Antonia lived. "It's here," Antonia confirmed, checking the address on her phone. Bianca's house. Before they even got out of the car, the front door opened, and a curly-haired girl ran out, followed by a smiling couple. Richard observed his daughter's friend. Bianca was Antonia's opposite, with her expansive manner and almost dancing movements, while his daughter usually moved with the caution of someone afraid to take up too much space. "Tony, you really came," Bianca exclaimed, hugging her friend as soon as she got out of the car. Antonia returned the hug with enthusiasm. "My dad let me, and he brought me himself." Richard got out of the car, feeling strangely out of place. Bianca's parents approached with genuine smiles. "Mr. Alcott, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Charles Foster, and this is my wife, Denise." "The pleasure is mine," Richard replied, shaking Charles's hand. He was a simple-looking man, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, but his handshake was firm and his gaze direct and honest. "Thank you for inviting Antonia. We should be thanking you. Bianca talks so much about your daughter. They're inseparable at school," Denise commented, a woman with an easy smile and welcoming eyes. "And don't worry, we'll take good care of her." "I have no doubt," Richard said, watching as Bianca already dragged Antonia to show her the house. "Are you going straight to the country place now?" "Yes, we're all ready. It's about an hour and a half from here in Rhinebeck, upstate New York, and if you'd like to join us—" "Unfortunately, that won't be possible," Richard replied, feeling a pang of regret that surprised him. The idea of spending a weekend in the countryside, away from meetings and spreadsheets, sounded strangely appealing. "I have unavoidable commitments. I completely understand." "Work is work," Charles said with an understanding nod. "Here's our address and phone numbers," he added, handing him a card. "You can call any time if you want to talk to Antonia." "Thank you." Richard put the card in his pocket, genuinely touched by the couple's unpretentious kindness. "Antonia," he called, seeing his daughter returning to the garden. "Come say goodbye." To his surprise, Antonia ran to him and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Dad, really." For an instant, Richard didn't know how to react. Hugs were not common in his routine with his daughter. Slowly, he put his arms around her, feeling how small and fragile she was. "Have fun," he finally said with an inexplicable lump in his throat. "And behave yourself." "I will behave, I promise." "Oh, and Antonia," he added, bending down to her height, "if you need anything at all, call me, anytime." The girl nodded with a smile that seemed to light up her entire face. "Bye, Dad." Richard watched the small group leave, the girls in the back of the car chatting animatedly, while Charles put the last bags in the trunk. There was something profoundly moving in the simplicity of that family scene. During the drive back home, Richard found himself thinking about how Antonia's life was different from his own childhood. He had grown up in a middle-class family in rural Vermont, where weekends were filled with Sunday barbecues, fishing trips with his father, visits to relatives. When had he decided that his daughter didn't need those experiences? When did he conclude that piano lessons, French, and etiquette were more important than afternoons in the park or bike rides? Upon arriving home, he found Rebecca in the mansion's private gym, finishing her daily Pilates session. "Did you manage to deliver Antonia to the country hippies?" she asked with thinly veiled sarcasm. Richard ignored the provocation. "They're normal people, Rebecca. A regular family with solid values." "Certainly very different values from ours," she retorted, wiping her face with a towel. "And now? What do you plan to do with your suddenly free weekend?" The question caught him off guard. Indeed, what would he do? His weekends usually involved remote work, business lunches, perhaps a round of golf with important partners or clients. He rarely had truly free time. "I don't know," he admitted sincerely. "Maybe catch up on some reading." Rebecca studied him for a moment. "You're really bothered by something, aren't you? Is it because of the school meeting?" "In part," Richard replied, sitting on one of the machines. "But I'm also starting to question some of our choices regarding Antonia's upbringing." "What choices specifically?" "The excessively structured routine, the lack of time to simply be a child, the fact that I hardly see her smile anymore." Rebecca sat beside him, her previous irritation seemingly dissipated. "Richard, you know everything I do is for her good. I want Antonia to have all the opportunities I didn't have at her age." It was true. Rebecca had come from a lower middle-class family in a Chicago suburb. She had achieved everything she had through great effort and determination, building a career as an international model before meeting Richard. Her obsession with etiquette, appearances, and social connections was, in part, a result of having had to learn all of this as an adult. "I know, Rebecca, but I wonder if we're not projecting our own ambitions and insecurities onto her. Antonia isn't you or me. She is, well, herself." "And who exactly is Antonia?" Rebecca asked with genuine curiosity. "Do you really know her, Richard?" The question hit him like lightning. No, he didn't really know his own daughter. He knew she played piano and sang in the school choir, but he didn't know her favorite songs. He knew she got good grades, but he didn't know which subject she liked best. He signed checks for her lessons and activities, but he never asked if she actually enjoyed any of them. "Not as I should," he admitted, the realization hurting more than he expected. "But I intend to change that." At Bianca's family's country place, meanwhile, Antonia experienced a freedom she barely knew. The property was modest compared to the places she was used to frequenting. A simple two-bedroom house, a small lake, some fruit trees, but for her, it seemed like a paradise of possibilities. The two girls spent the afternoon exploring the grounds, picking fruits directly from the trees, feeding the chickens that ran freely around the yard. Charles set up a hammock between two mango trees, where the children took turns, feeling the gentle breeze as they talked about their dreams and plans. "Your dad's pretty serious, huh?" Bianca commented as they swung in the hammock. "He seems important." Antonia considered the observation. "He is important. To a lot of people, at least. He runs several companies. Must be cool to have a dad like that, like a business superhero." "Sometimes," Antonia replied thoughtfully. "But he's almost never home. And when he is, he's usually working or on the phone. But today he brought you here personally. My mom was impressed. She said she thought famous people like your dad always sent drivers to do those things." Antonia smiled, remembering the surprise in her own heart when her father insisted on taking her. "Yeah, it was different." That evening, after a simple but delicious outdoor dinner, the family gathered around a small bonfire. Daniel, Bianca's older brother, played the guitar while everyone sang popular Brazilian songs. The starry sky above them seemed infinite, much brighter than Antonia had ever seen in New York City. "You sing very well," Denise commented, after Antonia timidly joined in one of the songs. "Bianca told us you're part of the school choir." "Thank you," Antonia replied, blushing slightly. "My mom used to sing too. At least that's what my dad says." "Did your mother pass away a long time ago?" Charles asked gently. "When I was 3. I don't remember much about her." A respectful silence followed the revelation. Then Daniel began to strum a new melody on the guitar. "Do you know this one, Antonia?" he asked, playing the first chords of Natante outra vez by Raul Seixas. The girl shook her head. "I don't know many Brazilian songs. At home I only listen to classical music, for piano lessons." "Oh, but you have to know our classics," Daniel exclaimed enthusiastically. "I'll teach you. It's quite simple." Slowly, Antonia began to accompany the song, her voice harmonizing with Daniel's naturally. The family applauded when they finished, making her feel a wave of warmth in her chest. Not the embarrassment she usually felt when she was the center of attention, but a genuine pride, a sense of accomplishment she rarely experienced. "See? You have natural talent," Daniel praised. "I bet you learn fast. Want to try playing a bit?" He offered the guitar, and hesitantly Antonia accepted it. Her hands, accustomed to the precision of the piano, felt strange on the more flexible strings of the instrument. Daniel showed her some basic chords, which she tried to reproduce, laughing when her fingers slipped or produced strange sounds. "That's right, take it easy," he encouraged. "No one is born knowing everything." As she practiced, Antonia thought about how this experience was different from her piano lessons. There was no pressure to get it right, no criticism when she made mistakes, just encouragement and shared laughter. It was fun, a word she rarely associated with her educational activities. When they finally went to bed, Antonia and Bianca stayed in the same room, in single beds side by side. Moonlight streamed through the open window, along with the sound of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. "Did you enjoy the day?" Bianca asked, turning to face her friend in the dark. "It was the best day in a long time," Antonia confessed, feeling a happiness so intense it almost hurt. "That's great. And tomorrow will be even better. Dad promised we'd ride horses in the morning, and then we can swim in the lake." "I've never ridden a horse," Antonia admitted. "Seriously? I thought rich people's country houses always had horses. We have a house in the Adirondacks, but we don't go there much, and it doesn't have horses. It has a tennis court and a movie room." Bianca was silent for a moment, processing the information. "You know, sometimes I think you're too rich to be happy." The observation, made with the direct honesty of a 10-year-old child, struck Antonia in a way she hadn't expected. It was a truth she had never been able to articulate herself. "You might be right," she murmured, looking at the ceiling, "but today I'm happy, truly." In New York City, that same night, Richard was in his home office reviewing some documents Michael had sent for Monday's meeting. His phone rang, an unknown number. "Alcott," he answered, in his usual professional tone. "Mr. Alcott? This is Charles Foster, Bianca's father, Antonia's friend." Immediately Richard felt a tightness in his chest. Has something happened to Antonia? "Oh no, don't worry." Charles hastened to clarify. "Everything's great. The girls are already getting ready for bed, after a busy day of activities. I just called because I thought you might like to say goodnight to your daughter. She didn't want to call directly because she said you'd probably be busy. Charles's words had a strange effect on Richard. The revelation that Antonia didn't want to bother him with a call to say goodnight was, at once, a testament to his daughter's consideration and a silent accusation of his own absence in her life. Yes, I would very much like to speak with her, Richard replied, closing his notebook. Great. I'll call her right now, Charles said with evident satisfaction. There was a brief moment of silence, followed by the sound of footsteps and distant voices. Then Antonia's voice came over the line, small and hesitant. Dad? Hi, Princess, Richard said, using a nickname he hadn't used in years. How's the trip going? It's wonderful, Dad. The girl's voice immediately came alive. There are chickens here, and I fed them. And Bianca's brother is teaching me to play guitar. And tomorrow I'm going horseback riding. Richard couldn't help but smile at his daughter's evident enthusiasm. He couldn't remember the last time he had heard her speak with such excitement about anything. Sounds amazing. Are you behaving properly? Not causing trouble for Bianca's parents? No, Dad, I'm behaving very well, Antonia assured seriously. Bianca's mom said I'm very polite. I'm happy to hear that. And are you really having fun? There was a small pause. Very much, Dad. I've never had so much fun. Thank you for letting me come. The sincerity in her voice made Richard feel a lump in his throat. You don't need to thank me, Antonia. You deserve to have fun. Dad, Antonia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Do you think I could come here other times? Bianca's parents said I'm always welcome. The question caught Richard off guard. His initial instinct was to give an evasive answer. We'll see, or we need to check your schedule. But something stopped him. Of course, Antonia. If you're happy there, of course you can come back other times. The sound of joy that escaped his daughter's throat was like music. Really? Even if I have classes or other things scheduled? Even then, Richard confirmed, feeling suddenly resolute. Some things can wait. Thank you, Dad. I love you very much. The words hit him with unexpected force. When was the last time he had heard his daughter say she loved him? When was the last time he had said the same to her? I love you too, Princess. Very much. After hanging up, Richard remained motionless in his chair, his mind filled with conflicting thoughts. Antonia's obvious joy at being in an environment so different from her usual routine made him deeply question the choices he had been making as a father. His cell phone vibrated again. This time, a message from Rebecca. I'm at the foundation event. Don't wait up for dinner. Realizing he was alone in the house except for the staff, Richard felt strangely restless. The mansion, usually a symbol of his success and status, suddenly seemed too big, too empty. Driven by an impulse, he went to the staff wing where he found Maria organizing the kitchen pantry. Dr. Alcott, do you need anything? The housekeeper asked, surprised by his presence in that area of the house. Actually, Maria, I'd like to talk for a bit. Do you have a few minutes? The look of surprise on the woman's face couldn't have been more evident. In more than 7 years working for the family, it was the first time Richard had sought her company for a conversation. Of course, sir. Would you like me to make some coffee? No need, thank you. We can talk right here. Maria indicated the small side table in the corner of the kitchen where the staff usually ate their meals. They sat down, creating an unusual scene. The powerful businessman and the middle-aged housekeeper, face to face in a kitchen that, despite being modern and well-equipped, rarely saw the homeowner's presence. Maria, how long have you been with us again? It'll be 8 years in February, sir. I started when Mrs. Camilla was still with us. The housekeeper hesitated when mentioning Richard's deceased first wife. And you know Antonia well. Probably better than I do, Richard admitted with a sigh. Maria shifted in her chair, visibly uncomfortable. I wouldn't say that, sir. You are her father. Being a biological father doesn't necessarily mean knowing your own child. Maria, and I think we both know I haven't been as present as I should have been. The unexpected sincerity left the housekeeper momentarily speechless. Then, with a courage born of years of devotion to the girl she had practically helped raise, she spoke. If you'll allow me to be frank, Dr. Alcott, yes, Miss Antonia misses you very much. More than you imagine. Richard nodded, accepting the truth without defensiveness. She seemed so happy today, going to that family's country place. As if she were escaping. I don't think she's escaping from you, Maria mused, choosing her words carefully. Perhaps she's just looking for something she doesn't find here at home. And what would that be? Human warmth, perhaps? Simplicity. Maria hesitated but decided to continue. Antonia is a very sensitive child, sir. She perceives everything around her. She feels the tensions, the unspoken expectations. Here she always seems to be policing herself, as if she fears making a mistake and disappointing someone. Maria's words hit Richard like a punch to the gut. That was exactly how he had felt throughout his childhood and adolescence, constantly watched, judged, pressured to be perfect. How had he allowed his own daughter to experience the same kind of pressure? Mrs. Rebecca is very demanding with her, Maria continued, now speaking more freely. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing. Children need structure and discipline. But sometimes I think Antonia feels suffocated. And what about me, Maria? How does she feel about me? The housekeeper looked directly into Richard's eyes, with an honesty few allowed themselves in his presence. She adores you, sir, always defending her father, always hoping you'll show up, always trying to get your attention. But I think over time she started to believe that perhaps she isn't important enough to deserve your time. Maria's words echoed in Richard's mind, bringing back memories of his own childhood. His father, a stern man from rural Vermont, and always busy with the small general store he ran, rarely had time for displays of affection. Men don't need such nonsense, he used to say. The important thing is to work hard and provide for the family. For years, Richard had sworn to be different. He had promised himself that when he had children, he would be a present, affectionate, involved father. How then had he ended up repeating the exact same patterns that had hurt him so much? "Thank you for your honesty, Maria," he said finally. "I think I needed to hear that." The housekeeper smiled gently. "It's never too late to change, sir. Antonia is still young. You have all the time in the world to build a different relationship." "Yes, you're right, and I intend to start right now." The next morning, Sunday dawned bright and warm, promising a perfect day for outdoor activities. While having his solitary breakfast, Richard received a message from Bianca's father. A photo of Antonia mounted on a small spotted horse, with a smile so radiant it seemed to illuminate the entire image. The caption simply read, "First riding lesson passed with flying colors." Something in that image, perhaps the pure joy on his daughter's face, perhaps the bucolic scenery in the background, or simply the kindness of that family in sharing the moment with him, awakened in Richard a nostalgia he hadn't felt in a long time. He remembered his own childhood in the countryside, vacations at his grandfather's farm, where he learned to ride horses, swim in the river, and identify birds by their song. Making a sudden decision, he called Charles. "Good morning, Mr. Foster. I hope I'm not disturbing you so early." "Not at all," Charles replied, with the cordiality that seemed to be his trademark. "We've all been up since dawn. The girls could barely sleep from all the excitement about the horseback ride. Thank you for the photo. Antonia seems to be having a lot of fun." "Oh, yes. She has a natural talent with animals. Very gentle and patient." The horse loved her. Richard smiled, imagining the scene. "Mr. Foster, I was wondering, would there be any problem if I showed up there today? Perhaps for lunch? I'd like to see Antonia and, well, get to know your country place a little better." There was a brief moment of silence on the other end of the line, as if Charles was surprised by the request. "But of course there's no problem at all. It would be a pleasure to have you. We're preparing a feijoada for lunch. Nothing too fancy, but we guarantee the hospitality." "That sounds perfect. I should arrive around noon if that's all right with you." "Excellent. I'll tell Denise to set another plate at the table. As for Antonia, well, I think we'll keep it a surprise." "She'll be thrilled." After hanging up, Richard went to his room to change clothes, opting for more casual attire than his usual Italian suit, jeans, a polo shirt, and comfortable shoes. He couldn't remember the last time he had left the house dressed this way, much less for a Sunday lunch at a country place. Rebecca arrived home as he was grabbing his car keys. She observed him with evident surprise. "Going out? I thought you'd be working from home today." "Change of plans," he replied simply. "I'm having lunch at the country place with Antonia and her friend's family." "You're going—" "What?" Rebecca's disbelief was palpable. "Richard, we have lunch with the Montgomerys today. You yourself confirmed our presence weeks ago." I know. I'll call them on the way and apologize. I'm sure they'll understand. Rebecca crossed her arms, her posture revealing growing irritation. I can't believe you're doing this. First, you let Antonia abandon her duties to play in the woods. Now you yourself are disregarding important commitments for… What exactly? Eating barbecue with strangers. They're not strangers, Rebecca. They're my daughter's best friend's family. Richard kept his voice calm, determined not to get into an argument. And yes, I'm eating feijoada with them today because I want to see my daughter happy. I want to be part of that happiness, even if only for a few hours. You've been acting irrationally ever since you received that call from the school. Whatever the director said, it clearly affected you more than it should have. Perhaps the problem is that it didn't affect me enough until now, Richard retorted, heading for the door. I'm sorry about lunch with the Montgomerys. If you want to go alone, feel free. Leaving a stunned Rebecca behind, Richard got into his car and started the drive to Heinbeck. On the way, he called Hugh Nelson Montgomery, apologizing for the last-minute cancellation and inventing a family emergency that required his immediate presence. The man, despite his evident disappointment, was understanding, perhaps more than Richard deserved, considering this wasn't the first time he had cancelled commitments with the Montgomerys. The trip to the countryside was peaceful, with Sunday traffic relatively light. As he drove away from the city, Richard felt a tension he hadn't even known he carried begin to dissipate. The air gradually became cleaner, the landscape greener, the sky bluer. It was as if he was leaving behind not only the pollution of far New York City, but also the weight of expectations and responsibilities that constantly accompanied him. Following GPS instructions, he eventually turned onto a dirt road, which wound between modest rural properties. The contrast with the environments he usually frequented was striking. No mirrored skyscrapers or luxury restaurants, just simple houses, lush vegetation, and occasional animals grazing peacefully. When he finally arrived at the indicated address, Richard parked next to two other cars, the Foster families and another he imagined belonged to a relative or friend. The property was exactly as he had imagined from the photos, a simple but welcoming house surrounded by fruit trees, with a small lake visible in the distance and an open area where some chickens pecked freely. As he got out of the car, he was greeted by Bianca, who ran towards him with an animated expression. "Mr. Alcott, you came, how cool. Tony doesn't know anything. She's helping my mom prepare dessert." "Hello, Bianca," Richard greeted, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. "I hope I'm not disrupting your Sunday." "Not at all. Everyone was super excited when Dad said you were coming. Come on, I'll show you where the house is." Following the girl along the stone path that led to the main house, Richard looked around, absorbing the details of that scenery so different from his usual routine. The air smelled of wet earth and dry leaves, with occasional notes of garlic and spices escaping from the kitchen. Some colorful clothes dried in the sun on a makeshift clothesline, and gardening tools were neatly arranged next to a small shed. It was a simple life, but there was a harmony and authenticity there that he hadn't experienced in a long time. Charles appeared on the porch, wearing faded shorts and a t-shirt with the name of some band Richard didn't recognize. "Mr. Alcott, welcome to our little corner," he exclaimed, descending the steps to greet him with a warm handshake. "I hope you found your way without difficulty." "Nothing GPS couldn't handle," Richard replied, feeling strangely at ease despite the unfamiliar environment. "And please call me Richard." "Only if you call me Charles," the man retorted with a smile. "Come on, let's go inside. Denise and the girls are in the kitchen. Daniel, our eldest son, is lighting the grill for the feijoada." As they approached the house, Charles added in a low voice, "Antonia has no idea you're coming. It's going to be quite a surprise." As they entered through the back door, which led directly into the kitchen, Richard was greeted by a scene that immediately warmed his heart. Antonia, her face slightly flushed from the heat of the stove, and an apron too large for her size, helped Denise prepare what looked like a condensed milk pudding. His daughter had flour on her nose and a smile so genuine it was almost painful to witness. "Look who's here for lunch," Charles announced. Antonia looked up, and the expression of shock that formed on her face when she saw her father was quickly replaced by a joy so intense it lit up the entire kitchen. "Dad," she cried, immediately abandoning her task to run to him. Without hesitation, She threw her arms around Richard's waist, hugging him with surprising strength for someone so small. "You came, I can't believe you came." For a moment, Richard was motionless, surprised by the intensity of his daughter's reaction. Then slowly he knelt to hug her properly, smelling the flower and vanilla in her hair. "Of course I came," he said, his voice slightly choked. "I wanted to see how much fun you're having." "I'm having so much fun. There are so many things to show you. The lake and the horses and the garden and the zip line that Uncle Charles set up." Antonia spoke quickly, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "And we're making pudding for dessert." "You're staying for lunch, aren't you?" "Yes, I am. I came especially for that." "And lunch with the Montgomerys?" The question, asked with genuine confusion, revealed how accustomed Antonia was to her father's professional and social commitments always taking priority. "The Montgomerys can wait," Richard replied simply. "Today I want to spend the day with you." The sparkle in Antonia's eyes was worth more than any business deal he had ever closed in his life. At that moment, Richard understood something fundamental he had forgotten. The true value of things could not be measured in figures or contracts. Denise approached, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Welcome, Richard. It's a pleasure to finally get to know you better. Antonia has been a wonderful visitor." "The pleasure is all mine, Denise. Thank you for welcoming my daughter with so much affection." He looked around, absorbing the details of the cozy kitchen. Shelves with spice jars, a calendar with birthday notes, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator with colorful magnets, a house that was truly a home. "And thank you for letting me invade your Sunday like this." "Invade nothing," Charles exclaimed, giving him a friendly pat on the shoulder. "Sunday here is a day for a full house. The more people, the more joy." The rest of Sunday at the country place unfolded like a dream for Antonia. Having her father there, actively participating in simple activities that for her represented true treasures of experience, was something she would not have imagined even in her most optimistic thoughts. After lunch, a feijoada lovingly prepared by Denise and Charles served at the large table on the porch overlooking the orchard. Everyone gathered in the shade of a large mango tree for a guitar session. Daniel, Bianca's older brother, taught Richard and Antonia the basic chords of Tarde et mi point by Vinicius de Moraes. To everyone's surprise, especially Antonia's, Richard showed a natural talent for music. "My father used to play a little when I was a child," he explained, adjusting his fingers on the strings. "But it's been so long I thought I had completely forgotten." "Music is like riding a bike," Daniel said, smiling. "You never truly forget. You just need to rediscover the rhythm." Antonia watched, fascinated, as her father, always so serious and formal, smiled when he missed a chord, laughed when everyone sang together, and even joined the impromptu capoeira circle that Charles organized on the lawn. It was as if she were meeting a completely different man, a version of her father that had existed only in her most secret fantasies. "Your dad's pretty cool, huh?" Bianca whispered, as the two girls watched Richard trying, without much success, to execute a basic capoeira movement under Charles's patient instruction. "He is," Antonia replied with a lump in her throat. "I just didn't know it until today." As the sun began to set, casting a golden veil over the property, it was time to return to New York City. Antonia helped pack her things, now augmented with small treasures acquired during the weekend. A toucan feather found near the lake, a drawing made by Bianca, and a macrame bracelet that Denise had taught her to make. At the farewell, Charles and Denise insisted that Richard bring Antonia again whenever he wished. "Our house is simple, but our doors are always open to you," Charles stated with the sincerity that seemed to characterize him. "Perhaps during the next school holidays?" Denise suggested. "We could plan a longer stay. The girls would love it." "That would be wonderful," Richard replied, and to Antonia's surprise, he seemed genuinely enthusiastic about the idea. "Perhaps I can even join her for a few days." In the car on the way back to New York City, a comfortable silence settled between father and daughter. Antonia looked out the window, watching the landscape gradually change from the intense green of the countryside to the predominant gray of the metropolis, while her father occasionally glanced in her direction, as if wanting to memorize every detail of her expression. "Thank you for the best weekend of my life, Dad," Antonia said finally, with the disarming sincerity typical of childhood. Richard felt something tighten in his chest. "Thank you, daughter, for letting me be a part of it. Can we do more things together now, like on weekends?" The question, so simple and direct, carried the weight of years of absence and distance. "Yes, Antonia, we can and will do more things together, I promise." The smile that lit up the girl's face was all Richard needed to see to know that he was, finally, making the right decision. Upon arriving home, they found Rebecca in the living room, apparently engrossed in her tablet. She looked up when they entered, her expression carefully neutral. "Welcome back," she said, putting the tablet aside. "How was the trip to the country place?" "It was amazing, Rebecca," Antonia exclaimed, still radiant. "I rode a horse and swam in the lake and helped make pudding, and Dad came to lunch with us and learned to play guitar." "Really?" Rebecca's gaze shifted to Richard, one eyebrow slightly arched. "It seems you had a busy day of activities." "It was wonderful," Richard confirmed, determined not to let Rebecca's slightly skeptical tone diminish the moment. "Bianca's family is extraordinary. They welcomed us as if we were part of their family." "How lovely. Antonia, Maria has prepared a bath for you. You must be tired after so much adventure." Antonia looked at her father, as if fearing that the charm of the weekend might break if she left him. Richard smiled reassuringly. "Go rest, Princess. Tomorrow we have the school meeting, remember? I need you to be well rested." "Okay, Dad." She hesitated a moment before asking, "Can you tuck me in later?" "Of course." Richard knelt down and, to the surprise of both Antonia and Rebecca, gave his daughter a tender kiss on the forehead. "I'll be there in an hour." After Antonia went upstairs, Rebecca observed Richard with evident curiosity. "It seems we've had a complete transformation this weekend. The powerful executive Richard Alcott, expert in mergers and acquisitions, is now also a guitar and capoeira enthusiast." Richard poured himself a drink from the discreet bar in the corner of the room, ignoring the sarcasm. "Let's just say I was reminded of some things I had forgotten." "Like what, exactly?" "Like the fact that my daughter is growing up without me truly knowing her. Like the fact that there's more to life than contracts and meetings. Like the fact that I've been so busy building an empire that I completely forgot why I started building it in the first place." Rebecca approached, studying her husband with an expression that mixed concern and confusion. "Richard, are you all right? It seems this country getaway has affected you in a way I don't recognize." "I'm perfectly fine, Rebecca. In fact, I'm better than I've been in a long time." He took a sip of his drink, feeling the liquid warm his throat. "I've realized some things about my relationship with Antonia. Things I intend to change." "What kind of things?" "To start, I'm going to reduce my workload. I'll delegate more, spend more time at home. I want to be present for Antonia, not just physically, but truly present. I want to get to know her, understand who she is, what makes her happy." Rebecca crossed her arms, a defensive posture that didn't go unnoticed by Richard. "And what about our agreement on her education? The extracurricular activities, the social engagements we carefully planned? I'm not suggesting we eliminate everything. Just that we reevaluate what is truly necessary and what is being imposed without consideration for Antonia's desires and needs." Richard paused, carefully choosing his next words. "Did you see the drawing that caused all that commotion at school?" Rebecca's expression tightened slightly. "No, I thought it was just another childish drama." "Well, tomorrow we'll know. The director wanted me to see it personally." "I still think you're taking this too seriously, Richard. Children go through phases. They have moments of sadness or frustration that are soon forgotten. If we overreact to every episode, we'll only encourage her to seek attention that way." Richard studied his wife for a moment, noticing something he had never truly observed before, perhaps because he had never really paid attention. There was a rigidity in Rebecca, an almost desperate need for control that now seemed evident. Could it be fear? Insecurity disguised as strength? "Rebecca," he began, softening his voice, "have you ever stopped to consider if the way we're raising Antonia is truly best for her, or if we're projecting our own expectations and fears?" "What are you implying, Richard?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm genuinely asking. We've created such a structured routine, so full of obligations and expectations, that sometimes I wonder if we've left room for her to simply be a child. A child who has all the privileges money can buy," Rebecca retorted with a touch of bitterness. Do you know how many children would give anything to have half the opportunities Antonia has? It's not about material privileges, and you know that. Richard put down his glass, moving closer to his wife. It's about emotional connection, about feeling loved, seen, valued, not for what she does or what she represents, but simply for who she is. A tense silence settled between them. Finally, Rebecca looked away. I think you're exaggerating, Richard. But she's your daughter. If you think you need to change your approach, that's your decision. She picked up her tablet and headed for the stairs. I have some messages to reply to. I'll see you later. Richard remained in the living room watching his wife walk away. There was something deeply sad about that interaction, as if they were speaking different languages, unable to truly communicate. An hour later, as promised, Richard gently knocked on Antonia's bedroom door. He found his daughter already in her pajamas, sitting on her bed with an open book. "May I come in?" he asked with a smile. "Of course, Dad," Antonia replied, putting the book aside and adjusting herself on the bed. Richard sat on the edge of the mattress, noticing the small details of the room he had never truly observed before. The light blue curtains Antonia had chosen the previous year, the books neatly organized on the shelf, the small globe she had received for her last birthday. "What are you reading?" Antonia picked up the book, showing him the cover. "It's about a girl who discovers a secret passage to a magical world. Sounds interesting." "Are you enjoying it?" "Very much. The protagonist is brave and intelligent. She's not afraid to face challenges to save her friends." Richard smiled, thinking about how his own daughter displayed these same qualities, albeit in very different circumstances. "Perhaps you can tell me more about the story tomorrow. Now it's time to rest." Antonia placed the book on her nightstand and lay down, pulling the covers up to her chin. "Dad?" "Yes, Princess." "Why did you come to the country place today?" "Really?" The question, asked with the surprising perceptiveness Antonia often displayed, caught Richard off guard. He could have given an evasive answer, something about wanting to check if she was okay, or about having unexpected free time. But something in his daughter's open and hopeful expression demanded honesty. "I came because I realized I'm missing the important moments of your life, because I understood that no business, no meeting, no contract will ever be as valuable as seeing you happy." He paused, feeling emotion rise in his throat. "And because I missed you, Antonia, more than I imagined I would." The girl's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I missed you too, Dad, every day." Richard reached out, gently caressing his daughter's hair. "I know I haven't been the father you deserve, but I want to change that if you'll give me a chance. I'll always give you chances. Dad, always." The simplicity of that promise, made with the purity of a child's heart that still believed in the best of people, even when frequently disappointed, deeply affected Richard. He leaned in and kissed his daughter's forehead. "Sleep well, my love. Tomorrow will be a new day. Are you really going to the school meeting with me? I'll be there without fail. I promise." With a final smile, Richard turned off the light and left the room, leaving the door ajar as he knew Antonia preferred. In the hallway, he paused for a moment, feeling a mix of emotions he couldn't fully name. Relief, hope, determination, but also a deep melancholy for the lost years, for the moments that would never return. The next morning, the Alcott mansion awoke with a different energy. Richard, usually already on his way to the office before Antonia even woke up, was in the dining room when she came down for breakfast. "Good morning." "Princess," he greeted, lowering the newspaper he was reading. "Did you sleep well?" Antonia paused at the doorway, momentarily surprised. "Good morning, Dad. Yes, I did. And you?" "Like a log. I think all that physical activity at the country place tired me out more than I expected." He laughed, indicating the chair beside him. "Come on, Maria made pancakes." The housekeeper appeared at the kitchen door, smiling at the unusual sight of father and daughter together at the breakfast table. "Good morning, Miss Antonia. Would you like orange juice with your pancakes?" "Yes, please, Maria." Enquanto comiam, Rodrigo manteve uma conversa leve com a filha, perguntando sobre seus planos para a semana, suas matérias favoritas na escola, os livros que estava lendo. Para Antônia, era como se estivesse vivendo em um sonho. Seu pai, geralmente tão distante e preocupado, agora focado inteiramente nela, genuinamente interessado em suas respostas. Rebecca eventually joined them, casting curious glances at the interaction between father and daughter, but remaining relatively silent during the meal. "I'm thinking of taking Antonia to school today, before the meeting with the director," Richard announced as they finished eating. "What do you think, Princess? We can stop for ice cream on the way back if the meeting goes well." Antonia's eyes lit up. "Really, we can?" "Richard," Rebecca interjected with a cautious tone, "you have that presentation for the board at 10. Don't you think you're taking on too many commitments? I've already asked Michael to postpone the presentation. The board can wait a day." Rebecca seemed momentarily speechless, something rare. "You never postpone presentations for the board." "There's always a first time," Richard replied, casually, although his gaze made it clear that the decision was not open for discussion. At 7:15, Richard and Antonia left together, to the astonishment of the staff who had never witnessed such a scene. In the car, Antonia sat next to her father in the front seat, instead of in the back seat where she usually traveled under the driver's supervision. "Are you nervous about the meeting?" Richard asked, noticing that his daughter seemed thoughtful as she watched the city through the window. "A little," she admitted. "I think the director will show you my drawing." "Yes, she mentioned it. It must be something special if she insisted I see it personally." Antonia was silent for a moment before asking, "Will you be mad at me?" The question hit Richard like a punch. "Why would I be mad at you because of a drawing?" "Because—" Antonia hesitated, nervously playing with her backpack strap. "Because it's about how I feel sometimes. And maybe you won't like to know." Richard slowed down, finding a place to park momentarily. He turned to face his daughter directly. "Antonia, I want you to know one thing. I will never ever be mad at you for expressing your feelings, whatever they may be. Do you understand?" The girl nodded slowly, though apprehension was still visible in her eyes. "And one more thing," Richard continued, gently holding his daughter's small hand. "I want to thank you for being brave enough to share your feelings even when they're difficult. That takes a strength many adults don't possess." They arrived at school a few minutes early. Richard accompanied Antonia to her classroom, something he had never done before, and said goodbye with a hug, promising to see her right after the meeting. Heading to the director's office, Richard felt a growing apprehension. What could be in that drawing that the director considered so important that she demanded his personal presence? What feelings had Antonia expressed that made her fear his reaction? Director Marianne Caldwell greeted him with a firm handshake and a professional smile. She was a middle-aged woman with short grey hair and keen eyes behind red-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Alcott, thank you for coming. Please have a seat," she said, indicating one of the chairs in front of her desk. "How is Antonia today? I noticed you brought her yourself." "She's well, thank you. We decided to change our routine a bit." Marianne nodded, as if the information confirmed something she already suspected. "Mr. Alcott, before showing you the drawing I mentioned, I'd like to talk a little about Antonia. Academically, she is an exceptional student. Intelligent, dedicated, with an above-average concentration capacity for her age. Socially, however, we have observed some concerning patterns in recent months." "What kind of patterns?" Richard asked, feeling his anxiety increase. "Increasing isolation, difficulty participating in group activities, a tendency to diminish herself, as if she felt she didn't deserve to take up space." The director paused, carefully choosing her words. "And more recently, emotional outbursts that seemed to come out of nowhere. The breakdown during art class was just the latest." Richard nodded gravely, absorbing the information. "And the drawing?" The director opened a folder on her desk, removing a sheet of paper. "This is the drawing Antonia made when we asked the children to illustrate my place in the world." She handed the paper to Richard, who took it with slightly trembling hands. What he saw made his heart ache painfully. The drawing showed a small girl, obviously Antonia, alone in an immense empty space, which seemed to be a stylized representation of the mansion they lived in. The girl's figure was tiny compared to the environment, as if she were being swallowed by the emptiness around her. In a distant corner of the paper, there was the silhouette of a man with his back turned. Richard immediately recognized himself, always with his back to his daughter, always distant, always unreachable. But what truly struck him were the hands of the child figure, disproportionately large in relation to the rest of the body, colored in a vibrant red that contrasted sharply with the rest of the drawing in shades of blue and gray. On the margins of the paper, in careful childish handwriting, Antonia had written, "My hands are tired of working so hard to be seen." Richard felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. "My God," he murmured, unable to tear his eyes from the image. When we asked Antonia what the phrase meant and why she had drawn her hands that way, she started to cry and couldn't answer, Marianne explained gently. "It was at that moment that we decided to contact you directly. Does she have other drawings like this?" "Some. Our art teacher noticed a growing tendency towards themes of isolation and abandonment in Antonia's works in recent months." Richard contemplated the drawing for long moments, feeling each stroke as a silent accusation. The image was so clear, so painfully honest, a child screaming for attention through colors and shapes, since her words never seemed to reach their destination. Can I keep this drawing?" he asked finally, his voice slightly trembling. "Of course," Director Marianne replied, observing him attentively. "Mr. Alcott, I didn't call you here to accuse or judge you. As educators, our goal is always the well-being of our students, and we believe Antonia is facing emotional difficulties that need to be addressed, at home and possibly with professional help." Richard nodded, unable to dispute the assessment. "Do you recommend a specific approach?" "To start, I think Antonia would benefit from sessions with our school psychologist. Dr. Helen has extensive experience with children in similar situations." The director hesitated before adding, "Delicately. And if I may suggest, perhaps it would also be helpful to review some family dynamics. Children of this age are extremely sensitive to relationships and the environment around them. They absorb tensions and unspoken expectations like sponges." "Yes, I'm starting to realize that." Richard carefully folded the drawing, placing it in the inner pocket of his jacket, close to his heart. "I will take immediate steps regarding the psychologist. And as for family dynamics, well, some changes are already underway." "I'm happy to hear that," Marianne smiled, standing up to indicate the end of the meeting. "Antonia is an extraordinary child, Mr. Alcott. She has a sensitivity and emotional depth rare for her age. With adequate support, these characteristics can become great strengths rather than vulnerabilities." "Thank you, Director, for noticing what I should have noticed a long time ago." Upon leaving the director's office, Richard needed a few moments to compose himself. He leaned against a wall in the empty corridor, taking deep breaths, feeling the weight of the drawing in his pocket as if it were made of lead. Antonia's written words echoed in his mind. "My hands are tired of working so hard to be seen." How had he allowed things to reach this point? How had he failed to notice his own daughter's silent suffering? Checking his watch, he saw that there were still 20 minutes left until Antonia's first class ended. He decided to wait in the schoolyard, needing that time to process everything he had discovered and plan his next steps. He sat on a bench under a flowering tree, observing the school in its daily operation. Staff circulating with materials, occasional older students crossing the yard with special permits, the distant noise of a physical education class on the sports field. It was a world he knew very little about, he realized, the world where his daughter spent much of her days. His phone vibrated insistently in his pocket. It was Michael, probably to remind him of the meeting he had postponed, or to inform him of some new crisis requiring his immediate attention. For the first time in his career, Richard deliberately ignored a work call. Instead, he took out the drawing again, studying every detail with renewed attention. Besides the red hands and the distant figure representing himself, he noticed something he hadn't initially perceived. Small blue strokes falling from the girl's face, like silent tears that no one noticed. Something broke inside Richard at that moment, a barrier he had built over the years, separating the ruthless businessman from the father he had once dreamed of being. The two parts of his identity, which for so long he had kept carefully separate, now collided with full force, and the result was an almost physical pain. When the bell rang, announcing the break between classes, Richard stood up, putting the drawing away again. He walked to the classroom where he knew Antonia would be, waiting for her by the door. Ao vê-lo ali, o rosto da menina se iluminou por instante, para logo em seguida se transformar em uma expressão apreensiva. "Oi, pai, como foi a reunião?" Richard smiled gently, aware of the other students leaving the room, some casting curious glances at the man in the impeccable suit standing at the door. It went well, Princess. We have a lot to talk about, but nothing you need to worry about, okay? The director showed you my drawing, didn't she? Yes, she did. And I found it very expressive. He knelt to be at his daughter's eye level. You have an incredible talent for conveying emotions through art, you know? Antonia seemed momentarily confused, as if expecting a different reaction. You're not mad at me? Of course not, my love. Why would I be? The girl looked away, shrugging slightly. Because in the drawing I show that sometimes I feel lonely. I thought you might think I'm being ungrateful, since I have everything many children would like to have. The maturity of that response, the precocious awareness of others' expectations and judgments, deeply affected Richard. His 10-year-old daughter had already learned to hide her true feelings for fear of appearing ungrateful or problematic. What silent lessons had he and Rebecca taught to produce such behavior? Antonia, look at me, he asked, gently lifting his daughter's chin with his fingertips. Never ever think you don't have the right to your feelings. Feeling lonely, sad, or even angry doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you human. The girl's eyes filled with tears. Really? Rebecca always says I should be grateful for what I have and not complain about anything. Being grateful for what we have is important, yes, but that doesn't mean we should ignore or suppress what we feel. Richard paused, searching for the right words. You know, Princess, I think I also need to learn that lesson. For a long time, I thought that working hard and providing material comfort was enough to be a good father. Now I realize I was wrong. A tear rolled down Antonia's face, which she quickly wiped away with the back of her hand. You are a good dad, she murmured. You're just busy. Too busy, Richard corrected, feeling the weight of each word. But that's going to change, I promise. Starting right now. How about we leave school early today? We can go get that ice cream I promised, and then walk around a bit, just the two of us. Antonia's eyes widened. I can skip class? Rebecca always says it's unforgivable to miss class without being sick. Today is an exception. Besides, I'm your father. It's up to me to decide what's best for you. And today I think the best thing is for us to spend some time together. He winked conspiratorially. It'll be our little secret. For the first time that day, a genuine smile lit up Antonia's face. Okay. After obtaining the necessary authorization from the coordination, a process facilitated by Richard's status as one of the institution's largest donors, father and daughter left the school, embarking on a small urban adventure. They started at the artisanal ice cream shop in Nats Greenwich Village, where Antonia, after considerable deliberation, chose a combination of pistachio with Belgian chocolate that Richard would never have imagined to be her preference. They sat on the small veranda of the establishment, watching the city's movement as they savored their ice creams. So, Richard began casually, if you could do anything today, what would it be? Antonia considered the question with seriousness. Anything at all? Anything within reason. We can't fly to Paris in a few hours, for example. He laughed. After some moments of reflection, she replied, I'd like to go to our Central Park. It's been a long time since I went there. We could rent one of those tandem bikes and cycle around the lake. Sounds perfect, Richard agreed, surprising himself with the simplicity of the request. He expected something grand, perhaps a visit to some expensive theme park, or a shopping spree in luxury malls, the kind of program Rebecca used to organize when she wanted to spoil her stepdaughter. But no, Antonia just wanted to cycle in a public park, an activity any middle-class family could enjoy without great expense. On the way to the park, Richard called Michael, instructing him to cancel all his appointments for the rest of the day. Yes, all of them. If anyone complains, tell them I'm dealing with a family emergency. Any problem, sir? The assistant asked, clearly concerned. No, Michael. For the first time in a long time, I'm doing something absolutely right. Central Park. The green lung in the heart of the New York City's metropolis was relatively quiet that Monday morning. They rented the tandem bike as Antonia wished, and spent more than an hour cycling along the bike paths bordering the lake, stopping occasionally to watch the ducks, or simply to rest under the shade of the trees. You know what's funny, Dad? Antonia commented, as they shared a bag of popcorn bought from a street vendor. I always see families doing this on weekends. I never thought one day we'd be here, you and I, on a Monday morning. And why didn't you think that could happen? Richard asked, genuinely curious. Antonia shrugged, carefully picking a piece of popcorn from the bag. Because you're always working. And Rebecca says public parks are full of germs and low-class people. Richard choked slightly on his popcorn. She actually said that? Yes, once I asked to come here with Maria, and she said it wasn't appropriate for someone of our social standing to frequent places where anyone can go. The revelation caused Richard a mix of shock and shame. He had never realized how much Rebecca's elitist values were being transmitted to Antonia. And even worse, he had never questioned those values or offered an alternative perspective. Antonia, I want you to know that I don't agree with that view. Public places like this park are treasures that belong to everyone, rich or poor, famous or unknown. And some of the most extraordinary, kind and wise people I've met in life had no social standing at all, as Rebecca would say. The girl observed him with curiosity. Like who? Richard smiled, thinking about his own journey. Like my father, your grandfather, who owned a small general store in rural Vermont. He had no formal education, but he was the most upright man I've ever known. Or like Mrs. Conchisson, the lady who took care of me when I was little and my parents worked. She was practically illiterate, but she knew the names of all medicinal plants and knew how to cure everything from a cold to a broken heart. You never told me about them, Antonia said, with a soft accusation in her voice. No, I didn't, and that was a mistake. Richard took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all the unshared stories, all the unestablished connections between the past and the present. I think over time I drifted away from my origins. I started to believe that material successes and achievements were more important than the simple lessons I learned in childhood. And what were those lessons? That a person's worth isn't in the size of their bank account or the address of their house. That hard work is important, yes, but it shouldn't come at the expense of who and what we love. That moments like this, simple but full of connection, are what truly matter in the end. Antonia reflected on her father's words, her young face taking on a solemn expression. I think I understand. It's like Bianca's family, isn't it? They don't have a lot of money, but they're always laughing and doing things together. Exactly like Bianca's family, Richard agreed, impressed by his daughter's perceptiveness. They understood something I had forgotten. They continued their stroll through the park, visiting the planetarium and then the Museum of African American Art, where Antonia showed surprising interest and knowledge about history and culture, asking questions that revealed a curious mind eager to learn. Richard realized with a pang of sadness how much of his daughter's personality and interests he completely ignored. Late in the afternoon, they sat on a secluded lawn, watching the sky begin to take on orange hues with the imminent sunset. Antonia leaned against her father's shoulder, in a natural gesture of affection that made Richard's heart expand with a feeling he couldn't fully name, something between gratitude, love, and a fierce determination to protect and nurture this newly discovered bond. Dad? Antonia's voice was almost a whisper. Yes, Princess. Why are you and Rebecca always fighting because of me? The question caught Richard off guard. You notice when we argue? It's hard not to notice. You think I don't hear, but the walls of the house aren't that thick. Antonia played with a fallen leaf, avoiding her father's gaze. It always feels like I'm in the middle, as if you have different opinions about everything related to me. Richard sighed, aware that his daughter deserved honesty. I think Rebecca and I have different views on education and upbringing. She firmly believes in the importance of structure, discipline, of preparing you for a successful future according to certain standards. And you? What do you believe in? The simple question demanded an answer Richard wasn't sure he possessed yet. I'm rediscovering that, to be honest. For a long time I agreed with Rebecca, or simply left the decisions to her because I was too busy with work. Now I realize that was a mistake. You deserve a present father who cares not only about your future but also about your present, about your happiness here and now. Antonia nodded as if the answer confirmed something she already suspected. Rebecca doesn't like when I show emotions. She says it's bad manners. That I should always maintain composure, regardless of what I'm feeling. The revelation made Richard frown. And what happens when you show emotions anyway? A significant silence settled before Antonia replied. Punishments. Usually losing something I like recreational reading or free time. Sometimes extra chores like copying dictionary pages or cleaning something the staff would normally do. Cleaning? What kind of cleaning? There are various things. Once I accidentally broke a crystal vase while playing in the living room, even though I knew I shouldn't be playing there. Rebecca made me pick up all the shards one by one and then scrub the floor until no trace remained. My hands were red from scrubbing so much. The words hit Richard like lightning, immediately connecting to the drawing he had seen earlier. The disproportionately large red hands. My hands are tired of working so hard to be seen. Does this happen often? He asked, trying to control the growing anger he felt. Not much. Only when I do something really wrong. Rebecca says it's important to learn that actions have consequences. I understand the principle, but Richard hesitated, carefully choosing his words. There are more appropriate ways to teach that lesson, especially to a child your age. Antonia played with the hem of her shirt, suddenly looking even younger and more vulnerable. At Bianca's country place, when I knocked over a glass of juice on the living room rug, her mom just said accidents happen and showed me how to clean it. She even helped me. Nobody yelled or got mad. The simplicity of that account, contrasting so sharply with Antonia's experiences in her own home, made something break inside Richard. How had he allowed his daughter to live in an environment where she was afraid to make mistakes, where natural emotional expressions were repressed as if they were character flaws? Antonia, he began, turning to face his daughter directly, I promise you things will change at home. I don't know exactly how yet, but I promise I will create an environment where you feel safe to be who you truly are, with all the emotions, mistakes, and discoveries that are part of growing up. The girl looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism that broke Richard's heart. Even if Rebecca doesn't agree? Even then, you are my daughter, Antonia. My primary responsibility is to ensure your well-being and happiness, and I realize I haven't been fulfilling that responsibility as I should. The hesitant smile that lit up the girl's face was like a ray of sunshine after a prolonged storm. Impulsively, she leaned in and hugged her father, surprising him with the intensity of the gesture. I love you. Dad, she murmured against his chest. I love you too, my princess, he replied, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her small, fragile body against his, and silently promising never again to neglect this treasure life had granted him. The sun was beginning to set when they decided to return home. On the way, Richard made a call that would change the course of the next few weeks. Dr. Rivers? This is Richard Alcott. I know it's been a while since our last session, but I'd like to reschedule an appointment as soon as possible. No, it's not for me. It's for my daughter, Antonia. As he hung up, he noticed his daughter's curious gaze. Who is Dr. Rivers? A very good child psychologist. Your school director suggested that it might be good for you to talk to someone, a trained professional, to help children understand and express their feelings. To his surprise, Antonia did not protest or question. She merely nodded thoughtfully. Okay, I think maybe I do need help with that. The maturity of that response, the self-awareness it demonstrated, only reinforced for Richard how much his daughter had grown without him noticing, not just physically but emotionally. There was a wisdom in her eyes that went far beyond her 10 years, an understanding of the complexities of the adult world that was both impressive and deeply sad. As they approached the mansion, Richard noticed that Rebecca's car was not in the garage. She was probably still at one of her numerous social or charity engagements. On one hand, he felt relief. He wasn't ready to confront her yet about everything he had discovered. On the other, he knew a difficult conversation was inevitable and possibly imminent. Maria greeted them at the door with an expression that mixed surprise and joy at seeing them together, clearly returning from a day of shared activities. You arrived just in time for dinner, she commented with a warm smile. I prepared that lasagna Miss Antonia loves. Yay, Antonia exclaimed, the day's tiredness momentarily forgotten. Can I take a quick shower and come down for dinner, Dad? Of course, Princess. I'll be waiting in the dining room. While Antonia went upstairs to get ready, Richard turned to Maria. Did Mrs. Rebecca call or leave any message? Yes, sir. She said she's attending a foundation charity dinner and won't be back before 11. She asked me to remind Miss Antonia to finish her math homework before bed. Richard nodded, absorbing the information. Thank you, Maria, and Thank you for taking such good care of Antonia all these years. I don't think I've ever properly thanked you for it. The housekeeper seemed momentarily stunned by the unexpected gratitude. It's my job, sir. And a pleasure. Antonia is a special girl. Yes, she is. More than I've realized until now. He paused, considering whether he should continue. He decided he should. Maria knew his daughter better than any other person in the house. Maria, may I ask you a direct question? Of course, sir. Do you think Rebecca, as too severe with Antonia sometimes? Maria looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the question. It's not my place to judge, sir. I'm not asking for a judgment. Maria, just your honest observation, as someone who is here daily and sees things I may have missed. After a moment of hesitation, the housekeeper replied in a low voice, Mrs. Rebecca has very high standards, sir. I believe she wants the best for Antonia, in her own way. But yes, sometimes I think the punishments are disproportionate for a child of that age. What kind of punishments? The question came out harsher than Richard intended. Cleaning tasks, mainly. Copying text repeatedly. Once, when Antonia was 15 minutes late from a ballet class, she missed dinner. Maria seemed increasingly uncomfortable. Sir, I don't want to cause trouble. You're not causing trouble. Maria, you're helping me see something I should have seen a long time ago. Richard took a deep breath, feeling a growing determination. Thank you for your honesty. From now on, if you witness any form of treatment that you consider unfair or excessively severe with Antonia, I want you to inform me immediately, day or night, no matter where I am or what I'm doing. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Maria replied with evident relief in her expression. Perfectly. Dinner with Antonia that night was a revealing experience for Richard. Sitting at the immense dining table, normally occupied only during elaborate social events, father and daughter shared the delicious lasagna prepared by Maria in a surprisingly intimate setting. Considering the grandeur of the space, can we have dinner in the kitchen next time? Antonia suggested between bites. It's cozier there. Sometimes I have dinner with Maria at the kitchen table when you and Rebecca are out. The suggestion caught Richard by surprise, not by the idea itself, but by revealing yet another facet of his daughter's life he was completely unaware of. How many solitary meals had she faced at that immense table? How many nights had she spent seeking the comfort of Maria's company in the cozy back kitchen, while he and Rebecca attended business dinners or charity events? Of course we can, he agreed, smiling. In fact, that's a great idea. This table is too big for just two people, don't you think? Antonia laughed, nodding vigorously. It's like dining in an empty castle. The image evoked by her words, an empty castle, seemed a disturbingly accurate metaphor for the life they had led. A luxurious mansion, filled with expensive objects and impressive spaces, but devoid of the warmth and intimacy that transform a house into a home. After dinner, Richard helped Antonia with her math homework, another first time that revealed how much he had neglected basic aspects of his daughter's school life. To his surprise, he discovered she had a natural talent for numbers, solving complex problems with an ease that suggested unexplored potential. You're very good at this, he commented, genuinely impressed. Do you like math? It's my favorite subject, Antonia replied with evident pride. Miss Elisa says I have advanced analytical thinking. And why have you never told me that? The girl shrugged, suddenly focused on perfectly aligning her pencil with the edge of her notebook. You never asked? The simplicity of the answer was like a stab in Richard's heart. How many other discoveries, achievements, and talents of his daughter had he missed simply because he had never asked? When it was finally time for bed, Richard accompanied Antonia to her room, a ritual he rarely performed. As she brushed her teeth and got ready for bed, he observed the space with renewed eyes. The room was beautifully decorated, no doubt, with exclusive designer furniture, an extravagant king-size bed for someone so small and state-of-the-art technology. But there was something strangely impersonal about the environment, as if it had been set up by a professional decorator without consideration for the actual personality of its occupant. Few truly personal items were visible, some books neatly aligned on the shelf, a locked diary on the nightstand, and the photo with her mother that Antonia kept hidden in the drawer, now placed discreetly behind the bedside lamp. Tomorrow we can redecorate your room if you like, Richard suggested, when Antonia returned from the bathroom, already in her pajamas. Make it more yours. The girl's eyes lit up. We really can. I can choose the colors and everything? Of course you can. It's your space, after all. It should reflect who you are. Antonia bit her lip, hesitant. Rebecca will let me. She chose everything here. She said it was important to maintain a coherent aesthetic in the house. Don't worry about that. We'll sort it out. Richard sat on the edge of the bed, gesturing for Antonia to get comfortable. When she lay down, he adjusted the covers around her, in a gesture that felt both strange and profoundly natural. Today was a good day, wasn't it? The best, she replied with a sleepy smile. Thank you, Dad. You don't need to thank me, Princess. Days like today should be the rule, not the exception. He paused, carefully choosing his words. Antonia, I want you to know that things are going to change from now on. I can't promise it will always be easy or perfect, but I'm committed to being a better father to you. You're already a good dad, she murmured, her eyes already beginning to close with sleep. You were just too busy to notice. The observation, made with the disarming honesty of childhood, brought a bittersweet smile to Richard's face. Perhaps you're right. But now I'm paying attention and I won't stop. When Antonia finally fell asleep, Richard remained for a few minutes, observing her peaceful face, her relaxed features so similar to Camilla's that it hurt. How had he allowed time to slip through his fingers like this? How had he missed so many precious moments of his only daughter's growth, moments that would never return? Silently leaving the room, Richard went to his private office where he knew he would face the next stage of his self-discovery journey. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Hello? The voice on the other end of the line was deep, marked by years and the unmistakable accent of rural Vermont. Dad? It's Richard. A moment of surprised silence followed by ill-contained emotion. My son, what a pleasant surprise. Has something happened? The question, immediately assuming that only a serious problem would make his son call after so long, was a silent accusation Richard knew he deserved. No, Dad, nothing serious has happened. I just needed to hear your voice. Old Anthony Alcott Whiskey was never a man of many words, but that simple sound communicated as much skepticism as hope. How's the girl? Antonia? She's well, Dad, growing fast. Smart like her mother. Richard paused, feeling the words he needed to say form a lump in his throat. Dad, I think I've made some mistakes with her. The same kind of mistakes I promised myself I'd never make. On the other end of the line, Anthony Alcott sighed heavily, the sigh of a man who knew well the territory of paternal regrets. Son, being a father doesn't come with a manual. We all make mistakes. Yes, but my mistakes are the worst kind. I've been absent, Dad. Physically present sometimes, but emotionally distant always, prioritizing work, money, status, everything except what really matters. Like your father did, old Anthony Alcott completed, with no rancor in his voice, just a melancholic observation. Yes, Richard admitted, the word carrying the weight of generations of repeated patterns. Like you did. And like I swore I never would. It's easier to judge than to do differently, son. That's a hard lesson all men learn eventually. There was a significant pause before Anthony continued. But you're realizing this while your girl is still young. I only understood when you were already a man, practically no longer needing a father. The observation brought Richard memories of his own adolescence and early adulthood, the gradual distancing, the occasional confrontations, and finally, the late reconciliation that never seemed to completely bridge the abyss that had formed between them. It's not too late for us either. Dad, Richard said, surprising himself with the emotion in his own voice, I'd like you to get to know Antonia better. Perhaps we can visit you in Vermont during the next holidays. The joy in old Anthony Alcott's reply was almost palpable, even through the telephone line. Nothing would make me happier, my son. Your mother will be radiant. She always says she misses her granddaughter. Upon hanging up, Richard felt something transform within him, as if a cycle was closing and another, healthier one was beginning to open. The conversation with his father had been another step on the path of reconnecting with his roots, with the simple but fundamental values he had abandoned in the pursuit of material success. It was in this contemplative state that Rebecca found him when she returned from the charity event, shortly after 11. She entered the office still dressed in an elegant evening gown, her diamond necklace reflecting the soft light of the room. Still awake? I thought you'd be exhausted after a whole day playing devoted daddy, she commented, the sarcasm slightly disguised by a polite smile. Richard looked up from the documents he was pretending to read. We had a good day. Antonia is asleep now. I imagine so. I heard you took her out of school to walk around our Central Park. Quite irresponsible, don't you think? Especially considering she has exams coming up. No, I don't think it's irresponsible, Richard replied calmly. I think it was exactly what she needed. What we both needed, actually. Rebecca poured herself a glass of wine from the small bar in the corner of the office, observing her husband with a mixture of curiosity and irritation. This sudden transformation into Father of the Year is intriguing, Richard. Am I to assume it has something to do with the drawing the director showed you? In part, he admitted, deciding that the moment for honesty had arrived. But it's not just the drawing, Rebecca. It's everything it represents. The silent suffering of a child who doesn't feel seen or valued in her own home. A child whose emotions are systematically invalidated or punished. A child who is afraid to make mistakes because she knows the consequences will be disproportionate. Rebecca narrowed her eyes, her posture immediately defensive. Are you accusing me of something? I'm not accusing. I'm stating facts that I ignored for too long. Richard stood up, closing the distance between them. Today, for the first time, I truly listened to my daughter. I heard about the punishments when she accidentally breaks something. About missing dinner for being a few minutes late. About having to clean until her hands were red and sore. Don't twist things, Richard. Teaching a child discipline and responsibility is not abuse, it's education. There's a line between constructive discipline and excessive punishment, Rebecca, and I fear we crossed it a long time ago. He paused, carefully choosing his next words. I need to know, why is it so important for you to control every aspect of Antonia's life? Why does the simple idea of her having a fun day at the park or spending a weekend with friends bother you so much? The question hit a sensitive nerve. Richard could tell by the way Rebecca tensed, by how her fingers gripped the wine glass tighter than necessary. It doesn't bother me that she has fun. It bothers me that you are suddenly undermining years of hard work I put into giving her structure after her mother's death. Rebecca took a sip of wine before continuing. You were barely present, Richard. You were so consumed by grief and then by work that you practically handed me a traumatized 3-year-old and said, take care of her. And I did, the best way I knew how. There was an unusual vulnerability in Rebecca's voice, a crack in the armor of perfection and control she always maintained. For a moment, Richard glimpsed something he had never fully considered, that perhaps Rebecca, in her own distorted way, really believed she was doing what was best for Antonia. I know you took on a difficult role, he recognized more gently, and I'm grateful for that, Rebecca. Truly. But the way we're raising Antonia is causing harm. She's becoming a fearful child, who hides her feelings, who thinks she needs to work to deserve attention and affection. And you think a few weeks of park outings and ice cream will fix that? Rebecca challenged. That you can just waltz in and mess up the whole system we built because you had a moment of paternal guilt? No, I don't think it will be easy or quick. But I know we need to change, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Richard took a deep breath, reaching the crux of the conversation. I've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Paul Rivers for Antonia. He's a specialist in child psychology. Rebecca's expression hardened. Therapy? You think our daughter needs therapy for being properly disciplined? Our daughter needs therapy because she's suffering, Rebecca. And yes, part of that suffering comes from the way we've raised her. Both my emotional absence and your excessive control. He held his wife's gaze, determined. The first session is on Thursday. I'd like you to come with us. To be judged by a stranger on how I raise a child who isn't even my biological daughter? No, thank you. The words came out laden with a bitterness that surprised Richard. There was a deeper wound there, something that perhaps explained part of Rebecca's behavior. It's not about judgment, Rebecca. It's about better understanding Antonia's emotional needs and how we can meet them in a healthier way. Richard hesitated before adding, and perhaps it's also an opportunity for you to express your own frustrations and difficulties in taking on the role of stepmother. Rebecca placed the wine glass on the table with more force than necessary. I don't need therapy to know that I did the best I could with what I was given. If that's not enough for you now, perhaps we should reconsider more than just our parenting approach. The veiled threat hung in the air between them. a first acknowledgement that the changes Richard proposed could have implications for their marriage itself. It was dangerous territory, but one he was now willing to explore if necessary. "I hope you reconsider the family therapy," he said finally. "But regardless, the changes start now. Antonia deserves a childhood where she feels safe, loved and valued for who she is, not for what she can achieve or how perfectly she follows rules. And if I don't agree with these changes? Then we'll have a serious problem, Rebecca, because I'm no longer willing to compromise my daughter's emotional well-being. Not for you, not for business, not for social status, not for anything." The following days brought a palpable tension to the Alcott mansion. Rebecca and Richard maintained a cold civility in Antonia's presence, but the silent battle for control was evident in every decision, every interaction. For Antonia, however, the changes were like a dream materializing. As promised, Richard helped redecorate her room, allowing her to choose new colors, furniture more suitable for her size and preferences, and, to Rebecca's discreet horror, a set of posters of Brazilian bands that Daniel, Bianca's brother, had recommended. The extra French and calligraphy lessons were cancelled, replaced by a math club Antonia was eager to attend, and guitar lessons with a teacher recommended by Bianca's family. For the first time in years, the girl's schedule had blank spaces, free time to simply play, read, or do nothing in particular. Richard also implemented changes in his own routine, delegating more responsibilities at work, refusing unnecessary trips, and setting clear limits for his time at the office. He now had dinner with Antonia every night, often in the kitchen, as she had suggested, and dedicated the first hours of his mornings to having breakfast with his daughter and personally taking her to school. The first session with Dr. Rivers was revealing. Rebecca, contrary to Richard's expectations, decided to attend, although she remained defensive and reserved during the meeting. The psychologist, a middle-aged man with a natural kindness that immediately won Antonia's trust, skillfully guided the conversation, allowing each family member to express their perspectives without judgment. For Antonia, it was an opportunity to verbalize feelings she had kept hidden for years: her loneliness, her constant fear of disappointing, her feeling of never being enough. For Richard, it was a painful confirmation of failures he was now determined to correct. And for Rebecca, though resistant, it was a first glimpse of how her own difficult childhood and insecurity about her role as stepmother had informed her controlling behavior. In the third week after the revealing school meeting, something unexpected happened. Richard returned early from the office on a Thursday, expecting to surprise Antonia, who was supposed to be in her individual therapy session. Instead, he found the house strangely silent, with only Maria apparently present. "Where's Antonia?" he asked the housekeeper, who seemed nervous and uncomfortable. "I thought her session ended at 4. "Mr. Alcott," Maria hesitated, clearly conflicted. "Miss Antonia is in the back garden. Mrs. Rebecca cancelled therapy today and, well, there was an incident with one of the crystal vases in the living room." Richard's heart instantly raced. "What kind of incident, Maria?" "Miss Antonia was practicing a song on her guitar when Mrs. Rebecca arrived. It seems there was an argument about the noise. Antonia got upset and, rushing out, bumped into one of the pedestals. The vase fell and broke." Without waiting for the rest of the explanation, Richard quickly headed to the back garden. There, he found the scene that would definitively change the course of their lives. Antonia kneeling on the grass, trying to clean up the crystal shards that had been brought outside. Her small hands were red and visibly tired, and silent tears streamed down her face as she worked methodically, clearly exhausted. Rebecca watched from the porch, arms crossed, expression impassive. "Almost done, Antonia? Remember to check for any small shards left. Broken crystal can be dangerous." The calculated coldness in his wife's voice, contrasting so sharply with the girl's evident suffering, provoked a rage in Richard he had never experienced. But controlling himself, he slowly approached Antonia, who hadn't noticed his presence, so focused was she on her task. When the girl finally saw him, her eyes widened in a mixture of relief and shame. "Dad, I broke a vase. It was an accident, I promise. I'm cleaning everything up." Richard knelt beside his daughter, gently taking her hands in his. They were rough, red, and slightly cut in places, Small hands are child's hands. Hands that should be playing, creating, exploring, not working to exhaustion to atone for an accidental mistake. Your hands, he murmured, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. They're tired of working so hard. Antonia's eyes filled with renewed tears. Sorry, Dad, I didn't mean to break anything. I know, Princess. It was an accident. Accidents happen. He hugged his daughter, feeling her small body tremble with suppressed sobs. You don't need to clean this up. It's not your responsibility. But Rebecca said— It doesn't matter what Rebecca said, Richard interrupted with gentle firmness. I'm here now and I'm telling you to go inside, wash those hands and let Maria take care of the bandages if necessary. Afterwards, we'll sit down and have hot chocolate while you tell me about your day, okay? Antonia hesitated, looking nervously at Rebecca, who was now approaching with a stormy expression. Richard, don't interfere. Antonia needs to learn that actions have consequences. No, Rebecca. What Antonia needs to learn is that she is loved unconditionally, that her dignity is respected, and that accidents don't result in humiliating punishments. Richard stood up, placing himself protectively between his wife and daughter. Antonia, go with Maria now. I need to talk to Rebecca alone. The girl looked from one adult to the other, clearly apprehensive. Will everything be okay, Dad? Everything will be okay, he assured, with a confidence he didn't fully feel. I promise. After Antonia went inside, accompanied by Maria, Richard finally faced Rebecca. This ends now. What exactly? This kind of treatment, this cruelty disguised as discipline. It's over, Rebecca. Cruelty? Her voice rose an octave. Teaching a child responsibility is cruelty now? She broke a baccarat crystal vase that cost more than many people earn in a month. It's just an object, Rebecca. An inanimate object that can be replaced. Her hands, her dignity, her trust. These are precious things that are being damaged in ways we may never fully repair. Rebecca recoiled a step, surprised by Richard's intensity. You're being ridiculously dramatic. A little manual labor never killed anyone. It's not just this incident. It's a pattern, Rebecca. A pattern of excessive control, of unrealistic expectations, of punishments that don't teach, they only hurt and intimidate. Richard took a deep breath, knowing he was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. I want you out of this house today. Rebecca's eyes widened in genuine shock. What? You heard me. I want you to pack your bags and leave. You can go to the apartment in the Upper East Side way. We'll discuss the next steps through lawyers. Are you kicking me out because of a broken vase? Have you lost your mind, Richard? No, Rebecca. I'm asking you to leave because I've finally seen clearly what has been happening under my own roof with my tacit permission. The systematic emotional damage to a vulnerable child who depends on us for protection and love. Richard kept his voice firm, though his heart was pounding. Antonia is my priority now. Her well-being comes before any other consideration, including this marriage. Rebecca's face hardened, all pretense of civility abandoned. You'll regret this, Richard. You can't just discard me after everything we've built. I'm not discarding you, Rebecca. I'm choosing my daughter, something I should have done a long time ago. 2 hours later, Rebecca had left, taking only the essentials and promising to return with lawyers. Richard knew a legal battle possibly awaited, but for the first time in years, he felt absolute clarity about his priorities. He found Antonia in her newly decorated room, sitting on the new bed more appropriate for her size, her hands now clean and treated with ointment. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was also a spark of hope in her gaze when she saw her father at the door. Rebecca left? She asked in a low voice. Yes, Princess. She won't be living with us anymore. Antonia nodded slowly, processing the information. Was it because of me? Because of the vase? Richard entered and sat beside his daughter. No, my love. It was because of many things. Mainly because I realized we weren't creating a healthy environment for you. And that's more important than anything else. Are you going to separate? Probably yes, Richard replied, opting for honesty. But that has nothing to do with you. These are adult decisions based on incompatibilities that existed long before the broken vase. Will I miss her? The question came as a surprise. Not an affirmation that she would miss her, but a genuine question, as if Antonia wasn't sure of her own feelings. Perhaps, Richard replied carefully. Relationships are complicated, Princess. We can have contradictory feelings about the same person. It's normal and it's okay. Antonia reflected on this for a moment, then extended her small hands, now covered with ointment and a few band-aids. They're not so red anymore. Maria put on some cooling ointment. Richard gently held his daughter's hands, feeling an overwhelming emotion as he realized how small and vulnerable they were. Antonia, I want you to know one thing. Your hands no longer need to work to be seen. I see you. I always will. And I love everything I see. The girl smiled through the tears that still glistened in her eyes. I see you too, Dad, even when you were too busy to see me. That night, as Antonia slept, Richard sat in the garden contemplating the stars he rarely noticed in the New York City sky. He thought of his own father, of the conversation they had had, of the cycle he was determined to break. He thought of Camilla, his first wife and Antonia's mother, and how disappointed she would be with the turn he had allowed things to take after her passing. And he thought of Rebecca, of how trauma and insecurity can manifest in destructive ways when not recognized and properly addressed. But most of all, he thought of Antonia, of her surprising resilience, of her capacity to love despite neglect, of her wisdom that often surpassed that of the adults around her. And he made a silent promise to the stars, to himself and to his daughter. From that day forward, her hands would never again be tired of working to be seen. Her hands would be free to create, explore, embrace, and above all, to simply be the hands of a child loved and valued for who she was, not for what she did or represented. The next morning, Antonia found a surprise upon waking. On her nightstand, a small new guitar, not a child's instrument, but a professional model suitable for her size. Alongside it, a simple note, for new melodies, new beginnings. With love, Dad. When Richard entered the room, he found his daughter already strumming the strings, experimenting with sounds, with a smile that lit up her entire face. Do you like it? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. It's perfect, Antonia exclaimed, running to hug him. Thank you, Dad. You're welcome, Princess. I thought maybe we could invite Daniel, Bianca's brother, to give you some extra lessons here at home. What do you think? That would be amazing. And can we invite their whole family for a barbecue on Sunday? Maria said she knows how to make that special farofa that Uncle Charles liked so much. Richard smiled, feeling a simple and complete happiness he had forgotten was possible. Of course we can. This house needs more laughter, more music, more life. And then we can visit Grandpa Anthony in Vermont. You promised, remember? I remember. And we will as soon as school ends. We can spend the whole holidays there if you want. Antonia hugged her father again, with all the strength her small arms allowed. At that moment, Richard knew with absolute certainty that all the material wealth he had accumulated, all the successful businesses, all the professional awards and recognitions, none of it compared to the treasure he now held in his arms. A treasure he had almost lost by failing to see what was right before his eyes the whole time. That love, true love, is not something you buy or earn through achievements. It is something you build daily, through genuine presence, dedicated attention, and above all, unconditional acceptance. Antonia's tired hands could finally rest, and Richard's were ready for the most important work of his life, rebuilding his relationship with his daughter and creating the loving home she always deserved.